Okay, the pressure is on. I was gonna wait a little bit of time to do this, but we just had so many people requesting it. So let's go through, and y'all know we live stream every single night. Usually I'm live for about 2-3 hours going through and just answering every fantasy football question that gets thrown my way. We're gonna do the same thing going forward. I'm gonna continue to live stream every single night answering your questions. But now that Underdog Fantasy is also offering 2022 fantasy football drafts, not gonna lie, I mean, at this point, I have done, how many live streams this season? Like 150 live streams answering questions. It gets a little tiring after a while. I mean, going through and just live streaming that long every single night, I know it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. It takes a toll on you. So it's going to be a lot more fun for me if we're able to go through and get in some of these 2022 best ball drafts. Now, of course, if you are unfamiliar with Underdog Fantasy, the drafts you are going to see on this live stream, they are real money fantasy football drafts. And what's great is everybody in this draft is going to be from the live chat in this live stream. So if you want to get into a draft with me any one of these nights, you can. All you have to do is make sure that you are subscribed to the channel, that you have the bell hit next to the subscribe button, and you come into the live stream right away. So of course, thank y'all, everybody who is here right now. And if you want to get into this draft, you will find that link in the live chat. But nonetheless, let me get this live stream set up. And okay, real quick, also, if you, for whatever reason, have not signed up for Underdog Fantasy, you can do that by going over and just going to the link in the live chat, going to the link in the comment section, the description of the video, whatever you're looking at. And when you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK, they'll actually match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. So if you want to come through and you want to get into some drafts with us, all you have to go through is make sure you, say deposit $10 on Underdog Fantasy. They'll match that. You'll have $20. If we're going to knock out these $5 drafts, then perfect. You can get into about 4 leagues with us and know with these leagues, you're not drafting this team and then having to go and worry about the waiver wire by the time we get to the next season. It's going to be a best ball format. So you're going to draft this team and then you're never having to submit a starting lineup, never having to look to the waiver wire. And that's automatically going to be submitted to you with your best starting lineup available. So say you draft someone like Marquez Valdes-Scantling and then in week 4 next season, he actually pops off with a random 30-point week. You didn't have to go through and submit your starting lineup. Automatically, he actually got inserted into that starting lineup for you. So we just sent out the link for a $5 fantasy draft. Of course, a $60 league pot down there in the live chat right now. I'm also going to run over to Patreon and send that there ASAP. And of course, I will answer any questions that get thrown our way, but I'm really excited to go through and get this 2022 fantasy draft underway. And please, please, please make sure y'all go and join these drafts with us when you can. Make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy and you use promo code FLOCK. And yes, this is the same exact site that, you can go through and you can get in those player props on. They have player props. They have fantasy drafts. This is why I reached out to Underdog Fantasy, because they are perfect for this channel. They have so much. Okay, so we just sent out the link on Patreon as well. We can go through and send this link out on Discord. And let me see the live chat really quick with who we have out here. Okay, so let's see if we have any questions. Jude says, hey, Mason, thanks for the help this season. I'm new to fantasy and I'm in second place thanks to the help, especially Javonte Williams. No, thank you so much for supporting the channel, of course. And sad to see that you're most likely getting Melvin Gordon back. With Melvin Gordon coming back in, I think we should be lowering our expectations some on Javonte Williams, just sadly. Okay, we're going to get a notification sent out on Discord as well. And now our next question coming out from Shane says, should I start Julio Jones this week if he plays? It's interesting with Julio because obviously it's not necessarily a tough matchup going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But at the same time with Julio Jones, his first week back from the hamstring injury, you're probably going to be a little bit worried here. Now, I will say it's also nice that you don't have A.J. Brown. I would look at Julio Jones. I mean, assuming that he is just ruled good to go this week, which he should be getting activated off the IR, which, of course, is a great sign for Julio Jones. I would view him as that low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. Obviously has the upside. The issue is just an incredibly low floor. And Tyler says, how can you draft 2022 if you don't know have the rookies in the league yet? My friend, it is a way too early draft. We're going through and we're working out the muscles here. As I've said, we're going to go through and answer questions. I just have so much fun drafting, and especially for Dynasty Fantasy Football, which you know that, I mean, I am by far and away, I want to say, more in depth with Dynasty Fantasy Football than anybody else on YouTube. I have the responsibility to make sure that I'm always thinking about the long term, that I always am thinking of 2022 at the same time. So yeah, this draft just filled. We are going to be at the 109 here. Let's check out who's going to be in this league with us. And okay, so you have Bastro, Joey, Barson, Adel, Girthquake. Okay, so happy to see we got Noah out here. Clanks. We got some usuals to the live stream. We got Jay in out here as well. So yeah, we're going to be drafting at the 109, and I'm not going to lie, I am nervous to say the least. And we actually need to be moving this up slightly here. Hopefully that looks a little bit better. And Jayan says, couldn't join fast enough once I got the notification. My friend, happy to have you out in the draft. And I'm going to say I'm very nervous. So this is going to be a 20-round draft here. Dear God, this is going to be a long draft. As I said, we're going to go through and we're going to be answering questions during this live stream at the same time. And hopefully this is fun. Hopefully y'all enjoy this. Please, of course, let me know. And we can go through and we can get these going every single night for the people who signed up for Underdog Fantasy and wanting to get in drafts with us. And now our next question is going to be, okay, Wrangler says Javonte Williams is going to be the first pick. We will see. We will see. I really like the fact that on Underdog Fantasy, you have it as a 30-second timer. We actually just did a Dynasty mock draft with a minute-long timer, and it took a very long time. And Super Desmo coming out says, Mason, are we going to start DeAndre Hopkins or Terry McLaurin this week? I'm going to be going through starting DeAndre Hopkins. Now, yes, DeAndre Hopkins will have a tough matchup on paper going up against Jalen Ramsey, but still, I mean, you know that's going to be a very high-scoring game between the Arizona Cardinals and the Los Angeles Rams, with DeAndre Hopkins clearly showed us this past week by playing every single snap that he is fully healthy. Not really going to be too concerned about DeAndre Hopkins this week. And Jay says, is this 2021? I'm assuming you're joking about that, my friend. This is going to be a 2022 draft. You have Jonathan Taylor going at the 101. Yes, Jonathan Taylor should be the consensus 101 for next year's draft. Cooper Kupp at the 102. I will say at this point, whenever we are going to be just in a situation where it's going to be very hard to know exactly what running backs are going to have jobs next year, I'm going to be going through with the strategy. I don't want to give too much away. I'm probably going to be drafting a lot of running backs early. I'd imagine I go a little bit more running back heavy than I'm used to. Justin Jefferson at the 103. Okay, so, I mean, I'm interested to see how far you have guys like Christian McCaffrey who dealt with injuries this season fall. And Jude coming out says, stuck on Terry McLaurin versus Hollywood Brown this week. What are your thoughts? I think Hollywood Brown's been a wide receiver that, yes, has been disappointing over the past month, but he's been consistently getting 10, 11, 12 targets. I mean, so if he's going to continue to get that kind of workload, I'm just going to be going through taking Hollywood Brown over Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, not the worst matchup in the world against Dallas, but still not necessarily something we can get that excited about. Chimichanga coming out says, don't get me addicted to Underdog again, my dude. My friend, I'll say I'm already just itching to get these drafts going. I really hope y'all enjoy these so we can go through and we can get these going every night. And Jay says, man, I'm screwed sitting at 6 and 7, and Adam Thielen is hurt, and so is Mike Williams. I honestly did not see anything happen with Mike Williams. Let me go through and pull up what happened with Mike Williams here. I did not see that report today. DeAndre Swift at the 105, Tyreek Hill at the 106. Okay, so let me go through and let me pull up who we're going to draft while we research Mike Williams. Sorry about jumping everywhere. Okay, so we had Derrick Henry, Christian McCaffrey as the top 2 players in ADP for the moment. Okay, you have Alvin Kamara going at the 107. I know everybody here is going to hate this pick. I don't really care. I don't really care that everybody's going to hate it. Okay, Najee Harris at the 108. I know everybody here is going to hate this pick. It is what it is. I'm going to go through and take the consensus 101 from 2020. Now, yes, he dealt with injuries. Now, yes, he has a very low floor. But at the same time, if we're talking about his ceiling, which is what I personally care about in fantasy football, we're going to be taking Christian McCaffrey here at the 109. Yes, he was very frustrating this year. This is going to be a 2022 draft, however. Okay, so let's go through and let's pull up what we had with Mike Williams this week and see if we should be worried here. So with Mike Williams, I mean, so yet again, Mike, you got another wide receiver going on the COVID list. Keenan Allen and now Mike Williams at the same time. Oh my gosh. I did not see that Mike Williams was on the COVID list. That is brutal. Now, JN decides to go with Javonte Williams at the 111. We actually took Javonte Williams in a dynasty draft earlier today in the middle of the second round. I think in a redraft format, I think that I honestly probably would prefer, I guess actually probably prefer Javonte Williams over even Joe Mixon, because with Javonte Williams, he will be the only running back in that backfield next year. Burke says Deandre Swift at the 105. Is that a good pick? I think it's a neutral pick. I mean, with Deandre Swift, I really think that, like, usually whenever you know the running backs that are going to be looking at those cheap jobs that you can get in the middle rounds, I think I'll be fine, like, going with the wide receiver here instead. The issue is, like, right now, when we don't have the clarity on the running backs that you're going to be able to draft in rounds like 5, 6, and 7, I'm actually probably going to be willing to reach on, like, a Deandre Swift here. And Anthony coming out says, what's up? Need some help. Start 3 running backs: Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, Alexander Mattison, Saquon Barkley, and David Montgomery. My friend, you're easily starting the first 3 options. I mean, of course, you have to monitor Dalvin Cook and the practice reports this week. Now, with that being said, okay. I know we were talking trash about taking wide receivers at the beginning of the draft, but you know what? I have to take a running back here. Look how gross the running back position is going to get later on. I think Davonte Adams is the better pick over Nick Chubb, but I have to get another running back. I'm not going to be the guy without running backs in this draft. So yeah, I know with Dalvin Cook, we're going to have to monitor if he's going to play this week, but assuming that you have no Dalvin Cook here, I think you honestly just have to go through and jam in Alexander Mattison. Okay, so the game will be on Thursday, so we should have some clarity with this. Let me look up what we had with Dalvin Cook. I know he was practicing earlier this week. Okay, so he's officially listed as questionable for Thursday night, so that is going to be something you have to continue to monitor. But assuming that we have Alexander Mattison as the starting running back, Alexander Mattison has shown us a floor that he's going to be getting to 20 touches every single week here. With Saquon Barkley, yes, he has a great matchup on paper, but obviously this offense looks like a train wreck. I mean, especially with no Daniel Jones here, I think you have to go through and you most likely just have to bench Saquon Barkley in favor of Joe Mixon, Najee Harris, and Alexander Mattison. And you also need 2 wide receivers out of DeAndre Hopkins. T. Higgins, Hollywood Brown, and Cordell Patterson counts as a wide receiver as well. Okay, so for our wide receivers, I'm going to be going with DeAndre Hopkins. Now, I know with DeAndre Hopkins, yes, he was disappointing previously, but that was the game they didn't have to throw the ball. I mean, it just got completely out of hand where Chicago really couldn't put up anything against Arizona. You're not worried about that this week in terms of what you have with Chicago. Really, not necessarily impacting Arizona at all because they played Los Angeles. I mean, with Los Angeles, we know that they're going to be putting up points here. I think you can go through and you can play DeAndre Hopkins, even going up against Jalen Ramsey. And between Hollywood Brown, T. Higgins, and Cordell Patterson, if you're looking at my rankings this week, we are going to have both Hollywood Brown and T. Higgins in a similar range. I have T. Higgins at wide receiver 14, and I have T. Higgins at wide receiver 14, and Hollywood Brown at wide receiver 15. I would prefer T. Higgins, so I think he's going to be in the better passing offense. And now, Jeffrey coming out says, hey, Mason, thanks again. You got DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown, Cordell Patterson, and Tyler Lockett at wide receiver. Happy PR. Should I trade a wide receiver for A.J. Dillon? I have Aaron Jones, Leonard Fournette, Melvin Gordon, and Sony Michel at running back. Okay, so we're a little thin on running back here. I would be fine trading away Tyler Lockett for A.J. Dillon with this roster in particular. You really can't trade away any of the other options, though. And really quick, if you have not dropped a like on the live stream yet, please make sure you go down there, drop a like on the stream. It helps us out so damn much. And yeah, see, we take Nick Chubb here. I'm not a massive fan of Nick Chubb at all. The thing is, I just really did not want to be in a position where we had no running backs to be selecting in the third. Like, you know, you're going to have wide receivers available to us in this range. And with a lot of these teams over here, I think they're going to honestly have to reach at running back. It's not going to be like it is right before the season where we have a good idea of who the running back 2 is going to be on the San Francisco 49ers. Here you have no idea with that scenario. So those running backs that have guaranteed workloads with Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb, I think you have to eat them up very early on at this time of the year. Okay, so DJ Hunter coming out says, who do I start, AJ Dillon or Brandon Aiyuk? I'm going to be going with Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, I'm not necessarily expecting that AJ Dillon comes out and automatically just sees the same workload that he saw the week going into the bye week. I mean, I know Aaron Jones was active in that game, but in reality, I mean, Aaron Jones shouldn't have come back. Aaron Jones really was not healthy. I think that you should just go through and bench AJ Dillon where we can, regardless of if you will have Deebo Samuel playing or not. I want to be going through and playing Brandon Aiyuk. And Joa coming out with our next question. Thank you, my friend. Says, I have Connor, McLaurin, and Cooper available for trade. Should I pursue a flex using these three? Who do you think I should be trying to trade for? I think trading James Conner at this moment is actually a very good idea. And the reason for that is, yes, James Conner's been fantastic, but that's been in the context where you've had the injury to Chase Edmonds. Once Edmonds comes back and regains the role that he had in the receiving game, I think you have to drastically be lowering your expectations down with James Conner. I'd be fine packaging him together with either wide receiver. And if we're looking for a flex play in particular, I would be going through and trying to get to one of those elite level wide receivers. Like if we could trade James Conner and Terry McLaurin and go and get someone like Davonte Adams, that'd be great. Maybe you can't get Adams. Maybe we have to go for Stefan Diggs instead. Okay, so Girthquake coming out with the triple running back strategy. You got Clanks right next to him, triple wide receivers. Okay, so let's go through and let's figure out our next draft pick. This is nerve-wracking. I'm not going to lie. This is very nerve-wracking. You have A.J. Brown at the 308. We have not taken a wide receiver just yet. Now, going through looking at the running back position. Okay, so the ADP is all thrown off here. The ADP really doesn't matter at all. I'm going to take Darren Waller. Okay, we're panicking. We're taking Darren Waller here. I mean, with Darren Waller, this is funny. This is a player that was going at the end of the second, previously in these drafts, to get that elite level tight end, knowing that you can go through and only have to draft one more in a best ball format like this, where roster construction is extremely important. I'm going to be fine getting Darren Waller at the 309. There were no running backs that I really felt like we had to grab. And at the same time, there's just a long list of wide receivers where I'd imagine that one of these other teams does go through and take another elite tight end off the board, and really there's not going to be another chance for us to be looking at a player like this where there are going to be a lot of wide receivers in that range. And Will coming out with our next question. Thank you, my man. Says, I have to pick two. We got Marquise Brown, Hunter Renfrow, DK Metcalf, Elijah Moore, and Tyler Lockett in a half PPR format. Okay, you definitely go with Hollywood Brown. With Hollywood Brown here, this is a wide receiver that, like we said, yes, been disappointing with the fantasy points scored over the past few weeks, but nonetheless, I don't necessarily think that you should be, overreacting to that, just because with Hollywood Brown, the volume still has been there in Baltimore. So I'm going to be completely fine going through and continuing to draft and continuing to start Hollywood Brown everywhere. And if we're going to be looking at our other spot between Hunter Renfrow, DK Metcalf, Elijah Moore, Tyler Lockett, Hunter Renfrow is the clear play with no Darren Waller in this offense. Now, if Darren Waller was to be good to go there, maybe instead you want to pivot over to Tyler Lockett. Now, so it looks like based on how many people have dropped a like on the live stream and voted on that poll, it looks like a lot of y'all are enjoying us doing this draft in the background as we go through and answer these questions. So please, if y'all want me to continue to do this, let me know. I would be happy to continue to make these drafts for y'all. Okay, so we have a couple more running backs. We have two wide receivers going off the board. This is why we decided to pass on the wide receiver position at that last pick. Surprised to see that JN decides to take Mark Andrews over George Kittle. George Kittle honestly probably would have been my pick, but yeah, both those tight ends go off the board. Very proud of that selection that we made with Darren Waller. Now, up on the clock now, I think I would prefer Deontay Johnson over any of these other wide receivers. Now, if we're going to be talking about running backs that are available, nobody in this range really stands out to us. I think we probably just have to, God dang, the thing is, running back gets so damn ugly so quickly. We're going to take Deontay Johnson here. With Deontay Johnson and the volume that he has had in Pittsburgh, y'all know I've never been a massive fan of Deontay Johnson. I think that we just have to fix that, because with Deontay Johnson, he's literally the profile of a wide receiver that I love. Well, yes, he's a little bit inefficient, but it doesn't really matter with the volume that he sees. It's not like the quarterback play can get that much worse with Ben Roethlisberger leaving this next year. So we're going to go with Deontay Johnson at the 404. And Jeffrey coming out with our next question says, thanks. And second question, with Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, AJ Dillon, Melvin Gordon, Sony Michel at running back, should I trade Melvin Gordon for Jalen Waddle? Hell yes. Hell yes. You're never going to be able to start Melvin Gordon again outside of an injury to Javonte Williams, even with a fantastic schedule for the fantasy football playoffs. Going for Keenan Allen, but that's a hard ask, worth a try though. Yes, I'd be fine with that because as we've discussed and as we covered about a month ago, Jalen Waddle has a fantastic fantasy football playoff schedule. Obviously, Waddle trending in the right direction at the same time. So I'd be completely fine going through and making that trade. Okay, so now you have some more running backs going off the board. You got Clanks taking Elijah Mitchell as his running back 1. This is honestly what's kind of worrying me here. God dang, was that Deontay Johnson selection a bad pick? Was that Deontay Johnson selection a bad pick? Should I have gone with a running back there? Let's see what Girthquake does. Girthquake took 3 running backs off the rip with Swift, Barkley, Montgomery. He goes Jalen Waddle, taking Jalen Waddle over notable players like Mike Evans. Really interesting there. JN says, Andrews is my tight end 1. If I didn't take Carter, I was taking Johnson. Okay, happy to see that you are on that same wavelength as me. Peyton says, Elijah Moore or Saquon Barkley this week in a full PPR format. I've seen a lot of these questions in regards of the comment section that we've had on our YouTube videos as of late. I've seen people asking, are we starting Tony Pollard? Are we starting Saquon Barkley? And I'm saying, of course, Barkley has been unbelievably disappointing. Yes, you're moving him down your rankings, but let's not get crazy here. I do think you need to be starting Saquon Barkley over Elijah Moore. I mean, with Saquon Barkley, it is a beautiful matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers, who have a very bad run defense. I mean, they essentially have a run funnel defense. So I think you do go through and you play Saquon Barkley over Elijah Moore. Now, Josh Jacobs at the 411. Maybe we can get another draft going after this if the live stream lasts long enough if y'all want to. Like I said, we're going to be doing these very often. So if you want to get into a draft with us, this draft filled really slowly. So, I mean, you can easily get into a draft if you just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And the thing is, Underdog Fantasy does take a little bit of time to sign up to because they have to verify that you're a real person. And so make sure that you do that. I mean, now make sure you do that before you try to go through and jump into the live stream and jump into one of these drafts, because it'll be very hard for us to send out that link for y'all to join. And then all of a sudden, I mean, you have to sit there and verify that you're a real person before you get in here. So make sure you sign up for Underdog Fantasy now and make sure you use promo code FLOCK. And when you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match the deposit dollar for dollar up to $100, as we said. And we probably should try to you know what we're going to try to do real quick? I am sorry. This is going to be very annoying for everybody in the live stream. I'm apologizing right now, but I think it will be better in the long term. I should have done this before the live stream. Let me fix what we have with these settings really quick. Okay, you know what? That's actually not going to work. Okay, that's not going to work for us here. Let's go through and let's remove this. That was a bad idea. We'll just have a little bit of annoying setup where we have to jump back and forth. You have Kyla Murray, the second quarterback going off the board here at the 503. I'd imagine that you have the Josh Allen drafter at the 307, maybe feeling a little bit bad with how they've seen this draft go since that pick. I mean, I'd imagine that they're not that ecstatic with that Josh Allen selection at the 307, knowing how many wide receivers, elite tight ends, and running backs have gone off the board since then. Michael Pittman at the 506, he had an ADP much higher than that. Let's pivot over. Okay, so you got a lot of wide receivers. You got some quarterbacks up here. Can't take someone like Darrell Henderson with Cam Akers coming back next year. Hawkinson's very low. This is great value on TJ Hawkinson. This ADP list is not going to be set. Okay, I think that we're probably just going to have to go through and take wide receivers here. I think that our next pick is either going to come down to Marquise Brown or T. Higgins. Yeah, it's going to either be Hollywood Brown or T. Higgins. They're both fine selections. We have not necessarily built in any stack options with either wide receiver right now, so it doesn't really matter which guy we go with. I'm not considering Tyler Lockett with this selection. Let's go through. Let's take our guy. Let's take T. Higgins. Y'all know how much we were screaming that we love T. Higgins earlier this season. I think the talent profile is there. Yes, Jamar Chase will be the wide receiver 1 next season easily, but I think T. Higgins at the 509 is pretty good. Now, Quentin coming out says, are we going to go Cordell Patterson or Aaron Jones? I mean, if you're looking at our rankings this week, they're not that far apart. We do have Cordell Patterson, above him. Now, yes, it's a tough matchup on paper going up against the Carolina Panthers, but still with Cordell Patterson, the matchup doesn't necessarily matter as much because this is a running back that gets the primary usage and the primary value coming from the receiving game rather than what he is as a rusher and rather than the rushing touchdown upside that he has. So based on his involvement as a receiver, the matchup doesn't matter as much. So I will be going Cordell Patterson, even though I think we want to be betting on the bounce back with Aaron Jones. Jayan says, just got sniped back-to-back with Higgins and Brown. Sorry to see that, my friend. Having to go with Devonta Smith, Darnell Mooney. Oh, that Darnell Mooney pick's gross. G Hall coming out with our next question. Thank you, my friend. I will get to that right after we make our next pick here. Okay, so our next pick, we got Mike Williams. Judy Mahomes is best player according to ADP. We have 2 wide receivers, 2 running backs, and an elite level tight end. A.J. Dillon, James Robinson. You know what's possibly interesting? Okay, they go Mahomes. Okay, Mike Williams. Mike Williams, I honestly don't think is a clear pick. We're going to go with Lamar Jackson because usually in these best ball formats, you can draft 3 quarterbacks and just kind of wait until the very end. I think it's going to be important to get an elite level quarterback at this time of the season. The reason for that is with a player like Lamar Jackson here, he's going to allow us to only have to take one other quarterback. And think about it. I mean, if we get down to the bottom of that list, you don't exactly know who the starting quarterbacks will be this season. So I would rather not try to draft 3 of them. I'd rather get an elite guy and then just get 2 players that we know are going to be starting every single week. Okay, so I actually really like that Lamar Jackson selection at the 604. And now G Hall coming out says traded Christian McCaffrey, Chuba Hubbard, Davonte Adams, T. Higgins for Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison, Stefan Diggs, Terry McLaurin. Other wide receivers are Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill. In win now mode this year, what are your thoughts? Okay, so clearly this is going to be a dynasty fantasy football format. I would say in dynasty fantasy football, I mean, clearly your roster in particular would probably prefer the combination of Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison so you can get production in immediately. But in a vacuum, I would say that there's going to be more value on the Christian McCaffrey side. And now looking at what we have with Davonte Adams versus Stefan Diggs, give me Davonte Adams in dynasty and for this year. And then between T. Higgins and Terry McLaurin, from a dynasty fantasy football perspective, I actually may prefer T. Higgins. So I understand how the trade helped your roster this year if you're a win now team that needs points in the starting lineup. I do think you overpaid a little bit here and lost out on some value across multitude of positions though. Okay, thank God we took Lamar Jackson. Thank God we took Lamar Jackson because we have a string of quarterbacks going. Get A.J. Dillon at the 6'10". That's a great pick with A.J. Dillon. A great pick with A.J. Dillon. Floodgate coming out and says, hey, Mason, should I start Dalvin Cook if healthy over David Montgomery? Also, Terry McLaurin or Elijah Moore this week. One thing you have to be concerned with is if we go back a couple weeks ago, I mean, remember with Dalvin Cook, his first week returning back from that injury, he actually only split that backfield with Alexander Madison, and then he ended up missing some more time there. Maybe I'm overthinking it because that's what happened with Dalvin, and we shouldn't necessarily assume that's going to happen yet again. I think it would be hard to go through and play Dalvin his first week back, but if we're comparing him to David Montgomery in particular, I would imagine that Dalvin Cook does have a higher ceiling with that Pittsburgh Steelers defense. They are a better pass defense than they are a run defense, so I definitely would take Dalvin. And then also start Terry McLaurin or Elijah Moore. We're going to go Terry McLaurin. I definitely think we're dropping him down our rankings. I don't necessarily think we can put him in the same range as Elijah Moore, however. And really quick, I just noticed that, I mean, down there in the little ticker symbol, it says deposit $10 and get the bonus of $25. That is outdated. That's from our previous Underdog live streams that we were doing coming into the season. Now their promo is when you use promo code FLOCK. I know I've said this 10 times in the live stream, but just saying it again for anybody looking at that promo. Whatever you deposit, they match dollar for dollar. So if you deposit $50, they'll add on $50 to that deposit. Okay, so after we take Lamar Jackson, you got a decent amount of quarterbacks. You got some tight ends. Love seeing that these tight ends go when we have Darren Waller. I think this draft is falling our way perfectly. I think we've crushed this draft. Okay, now our next question coming out from Eduardo. Thank you, my friend. Says, choose 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a flex. Running backs are Alexander Madison, Elijah Mitchell, Nick Chubb, Dalvin Cook, and Jamal Williams. Okay, so I think that we're going to be starting the starting running back for the Minnesota Vikings, whoever that may be between the combination of Alexander Madison and Dalvin Cook. And then we're also going to go through and we are going to be playing Nick Chubb. Actually, no, we have to play Elijah Mitchell over Nick Chubb. I mean, if we're looking at our rankings this week, we do have Elijah Mitchell about 5 spots higher. I mean, even if Deebo Samuel is coming back, I think with Nick Chubb, it's just a horrible matchup against the Baltimore Ravens. And Elijah Mitchell has a better workload at the same time. So let's go Elijah Mitchell and whoever the starting running back will be for the Minnesota Vikings as our top 2 running backs. As our wide receivers, Tyreek Hill, T. Higgins, Van Jefferson, Chase Claypool, Julio Jones, Mike Williams. Okay, it looks like we can't start Mike Williams. The easy answer here is Tyreek Hill and T. Higgins. And then you're going to go through and play Nick Chubb in the flex spot despite the really tough matchup. Okay, so now we're about to be back up on the clock, and I'd imagine that there's not going to be a single running back that we can look to draft. I mean, you got Darrell Henderson at the top of the list, but obviously, I mean, you will have... Oh, my God, this is disgusting. I guess we should not have taken Deontay Johnson. We should not have taken T. Higgins. We should have just drafted running backs early. Darrell Henderson goes to the 707. If Darrell Henderson was going to fall, we would have drafted him. Trey Lance to the 708. Love to see that Trey Lance pick. We're gonna have to pass. I think we go back-to-back wide receiver here. I know it's boring. I think it's going to be the value. Now, obviously, it's not that fun going through and drafting an injured wide receiver. You know what we'll probably do is we'll probably go through and just chase the stack in the Pittsburgh Steelers offense. Since we've already drafted Deontay Johnson, let's get a double stack going in here for this team. Let's take Chase Claypool. Should be going into year 3 this upcoming season. Possibly has not hit his ceiling just yet. And our next question coming out from RS German. Happy to have you out here, my friend. Says, good evening. I got Stefan Diggs, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon, and Nick Chubb with DJ Moore at the flex. Also got Alexander Madison and Kareem Hunt on the bench. This is the first week of the playoffs. Should I make any moves? Thank you, my friend. No, thank you so much for coming out to the stream, of course. Okay, so on the bench, we have Alexander Madison and Kareem Hunt. So I would love to get Alexander Madison in here. Now, of course, you have to go through and monitor Dalvin Cook and his injury. There is an outside chance that Dalvin Cook does play tomorrow. But if you would have Dalvin Cook sit, I would actually prefer playing Alexander Madison over someone like Nick Chubb. Obviously, Nick Chubb's the more talented running back. The thing is, Alexander Madison will have a better matchup. And at the same time with Alexander Madison, he will have a better workload. He will see more carries. He will see more targets than Nick Chubb. So I would prefer going with Alexander Madison over him. And then also not going to be changing anything else. I mean, I think Kareem Hunt should stay on your bench based on the bad matchup he has himself. But thank you so much for a massive donation and supporting the channel, my friend. And let's go over to our next pick. As we said, we're probably going to be going back-to-back wide receivers here. We're going to be going down the board a little bit. I know people are probably not going to be fond of this pick. It is what it is. So Hunter Renfrow goes off. I'm probably going to go Brandon Iuke. Unless someone has an argument to go elsewhere. Like, I can't take Sutton. I'm not taking Cooks. Thomas has more upside. The issue is, what's the situation you're looking at in New Orleans? There's a chance he doesn't even play. We're going to go Brandon Iuke, yet again, another wide receiver that was drafted. I mean, this time in the first round in that 2020 draft class. I mean, this is the team that's loaded up with those 2020 wide receivers. I mean, you had T. Higgins drafted in the top of the second round with the first pick in the second round. You had Chase Claypool drafted in the middle of the second round to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And yet Iuke, I mean, with the 49ers trading up to get him at the end of the first. So we're getting a lot of young wide receiver talent on this league. And you have to start 3 wide receivers here. Okay, so Jan says, Hope Mason freaks out about my next pick. Okay, so going with Stafford, Ramondre Stevenson. Maybe you're talking about the next one. I think those are maybe a little bit standard here. Now, our next question coming out from S. Huss, who says, 12-team PPR, trade away DeAndre Hopkins and Elijah Mitchell for Ezekiel Elliott, Keenan Allen, and Devontae Freeman. 9-4, very likely going to get the bye. Also, what are your thoughts on Kadarius Toney in Dynasty? Based on the Dynasty draft that we did earlier today, I actually think that Kadarius Toney is a very strong value in Dynasty fantasy football in particular. Because if you're looking at Kadarius Toney, where, I mean, he's going drafted right now, it's at a very reasonable range. And at the same time, this is a wide receiver that was a first-round NFL draft pick that at the same time showed the upside where he did have a game with 189 receiving yards earlier this year. So, yeah, I'm completely fine going out of our way and trading for Kadarius Toney, holding on to Kadarius Toney. So now, if we're trading away DeAndre Hopkins and Elijah Mitchell for Zeke, Keenan Allen, and Devontae Freeman, I think that we would prefer DeAndre Hopkins over Zeke. I'd prefer Zeke over DeAndre Hopkins based on how valuable the running back position is. Keenan Allen versus Elijah Mitchell, almost a wash, getting Devontae Freeman. Okay, so I'm assuming that this first question is not for a Dynasty league. If it is for a Dynasty format, I probably would prefer Hopkins and Elijah Mitchell. If it's going to be for a redraft team, I'd prefer Zeke and Keenan Allen. And then also, as we said with Kadarius Toney, I think he's a strong value in Dynasty at the moment. And John coming out with our next question says, full PPR, drop Jamal Williams for Donta Foreman or Dontrell Hilliard. No, I would not, because with Jamal Williams, I mean, you know you're getting 50% of the snaps. Unless, let me see if there was a report that came out today about DeAndre Swift and if DeAndre Swift will be playing. I mean, once DeAndre Swift comes back, then yes, you can go through and drop Jamal Williams. Okay, so no, DeAndre Swift did not practice today, so I'd be surprised if they rushed DeAndre Swift back for a lost season here. So no, I would go through and roster Jamal Williams over both those running backs. Okay, so now Joey Ford coming out says, pick 3, please. We got Henderson / Sony Michel. Okay, so whoever the starting running back will be for the Los Angeles Rams. Alexander Madison, yes. Javonte Williams, or DJ Moore. I think we go through and start all of the running backs. Now, yes, DJ Moore has a strong matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. Now, the issue is, this passing offense is going to be horrible. This passing offense, with Cam Newton under center, I think you have to go through and you have to avoid it, really at all costs, and just getting these guaranteed running backs that are going to have the workloads. And with Javonte Williams, great matchup against the Detroit Lions as well. I would go through and play the running backs. And now Jenna coming out and says, flex this week, Curtis Samuel, KJ Osborne, Nick Westbrook, or Jalen Guyton. Also, I wanted to join Patreon for the Dynasty League. Am I too late? No, we will have a ton of Dynasty Leagues all offseason on Patreon. We have 20 Patreon Dynasty Leagues. And I'd imagine that we have a decent amount of open spots for anybody wanting to get into those Dynasty Leagues this offseason. So don't worry, we'll be making announcements on that for over there on Patreon. What you saw on Patreon today was a Dynasty mock draft. That wasn't a real league. And for our flex spot, honestly, I think that we have an easy call. I think you go KJ Osborne. With Jalen Guyton, I know a lot of people are probably going to go through and play him now that you have both Mike Williams and Keenan Allen on the COVID list. Now, the issue is Jalen Guyton is a field-stretching wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers. I really don't think you can go through and play Jalen Guyton with any kind of confidence. Now, Pat Frymuth goes at the 904. Gabe asked why we did not take Jerry Jeudy and why instead we went with Brandon Ayuk, because, with Brandon Ayuk, he's in a much better offense. And with Jerry Jeudy, they re-signed both Tim Patrick and Cortland Sutton. Tito says, was Jalen Guyton a good pickup? Like I said, with Jalen Guyton, he's a poor man's Deshaun Jackson. Like, if you're talking about a best ball format like this, then maybe sure. Now, the issue is you have no idea when you're ever going to be able to start Jalen Guyton. Now, Girthquake goes through and he takes Deshaun Watson. Really interesting there. Obviously, a pick with a ton of upside. Okay, so now let's go through and let's get ready for our next few selections. Patrick, Rashad Bateman, Juju, Jamal Agnew, Van Jefferson, Tyler Boyd, Julio Jones. I think there's a clear pick on the board. Unless I'm... Let me go through and make sure I'm not overlooking anybody here. Because this ADP is not set by any means. Okay, Edmonds goes. Yeah, so I think we have a clear pick of Rashad Bateman. Juju is going to be a free agent. The issue is with Juju Smith-Schuster, what kind of realistic workload are we expecting? And with Rashad Bateman, we will have the stack with Lamar Jackson. So it's going to be an easy pick for Rashad Bateman for us at the 909. I honestly feel like we've crushed this draft. A running back, Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb. A wide receiver, Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins, Chase Claypool, Brandon Ayuk, Rashad Bateman. A lot of young talent. An elite level tight end with Darren Waller and an elite level quarterback with Lamar Jackson. Potentially both the tight end one and the quarterback one next year. Okay, so Chimichanga coming out says, are we starting Cam Newton or Derek Carr? You're going to be starting Cam Newton. Obviously, Derek Carr is the better NFL quarterback at this point. But with Cam Newton, you still have that elite rushing upside. And also, it's a nice matchup as well against the Atlanta Falcons. And then our next question I can find in the chat coming out from Bennett says, are we going to go with Gronk or Elijah Moore the flex? Okay, we've said this over the past few weeks now. Y'all know our number one rule. You're not flexing a tight end. But with that being said, if you're looking at Rob Gronkowski, he is the exception. He is 100% the exception where you can go through and flex him because he's playing in one of the best offenses in the NFL. And at the same time, not only is he playing in one of the best offenses in the NFL, but he's also going through and seeing about 8 targets a game in that offense. So hell yes, I think you go through and you put Rob Gronkowski in the flex spot and you really don't even necessarily have to think about it either. Now, Juju goes at the 10:01, the player that we were previously discussing. Gus Edwards coming off the torn ACL is going to go at the 9:12. Okay, we're going to be at the 10:04. Corey Davis, Kenny Golladay, Jacoby Myers. Okay, so it looks like wide receivers probably dried up here. Looks like every position's dried up at this point. Melvin Gordon goes. I actually like that pick with Melvin Gordon. I think he does get a job next year. I'm probably going to go with the boring wide receiver selection, but someone that will have a role in his offense. And I think if we just, at this point, we just need players that we know we're going to be playing. I think that is Tyler Boyd. I think Tyler Boyd's going to be in Cincinnati. He's going to be in a high-scoring offense as well. So let's take Tyler Boyd as our wide receiver 6. Keep in mind, this is going to be a best ball format as well. We don't have to know when we're starting these players. I mean, if you have a random week from Tyler Boyd and he does pop off, we are going to get that in our starting lineup. You could have talked me into Alexander Mattison here. That was my other consideration. I just think that those wide receivers are going to dry out, and in a best ball format like this, they're so important. And then Griffin coming out says Brady or Taysom Hill. Okay, so obviously Taysom Hill has that elite rushing upside. Taysom Hill gave you over 100 rushing yards this past week. I don't think you can start Taysom Hill, however, over Tom Brady. That's going to be a very difficult proposition to make. Just go through and give me Tom Brady over Taysom Hill. With Tom Brady, you know he's going to be a quarterback with a very high floor, a very high ceiling. Going up against, yes, a tough matchup against the Buffalo Bills, much tougher than Taysom Hill against the New York Jets. I don't really care, though. And Joey coming out says, your team is going to hurt when CMC is hurt per usual. Yes, that is one way to view it, but how I view fantasy football and how I've been very successful and had a much higher win rate than average and have made money off a large sample every single year since 2014 is I come into this draft and I go, okay, there are 12 people in this draft. One of them is going to win. One of them is going to win. So when we decide to take Christian McCaffrey in the first round, when we decide to take Christian McCaffrey at the 109, the only way we win this draft is if Christian McCaffrey stays healthy. That's the only way we win this league. So from there, we have to assume that Christian McCaffrey is going to stay healthy. 11 out of 12 teams are going to lose. If Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, sure, we lose. But that was, I mean, you have a 93% chance, 92 point something percent chance of losing anyway. So yeah, we are instead going to take our second running back here and then load up on a lot of value in the middle rounds. Like I honestly really like what we did. Okay, so now Alex coming out says start to David Montgomery, DeAndre Hopkins, and Ezekiel Elliott. You go David Montgomery and DeAndre Hopkins. You can't start Ezekiel Elliott when we don't know how many touches he's going to be getting. April coming out says, thanks for the advice this season and the hat. Hoping that you like the hat, April. Says, made the playoffs in both my leagues, even killing half of my best ball leagues. I listen daily. Thank you so much, April. I know you're out at the very beginning of the season. Super happy that we were able to get that hat sent out to you. Thank you so much, of course. And let's go through and let's see our next one. Okay, so Bougie Buck Nasty coming out says Donta Foreman or Devontae Freeman in a full PPR format. In my opinion, you have to go through and you have to play Devontae Freeman. I made the horrible mistake of telling everybody who asked us, last week, to go through and bench Devontae Freeman. Despite him having back-to-back weeks with 16 carries, despite, him playing in a pretty damn good offense, I think you have to go through and you have to play Devontae Freeman. He also had the involvement as a receiving running back as well out of the backfield, which I think you can get excited about. Okay, now we have Kirk Cousins and Jalen Hurts going off as the quarterbacks here. Who are we looking at left at the quarterback position? Okay, we have Tannehill. Okay, so you have some guaranteed starters. You got Tannehill, Carr, Lawrence, Jones, Wentz, Matt Ryan. We don't know if Matt Ryan's a guaranteed starter. You have some guaranteed starters left. I'll say that. Okay. So you got some tight ends going off. Don't really care about the tight ends going off. And let's go find another one. Okay, so Fantasy Dog says, wow, I just checked my 15 puppy drafts. We got 2 in first, 2 in at third, 3 at fourth, and 3 at fifth. Good luck. No, that is a great win rate. I will say with Underdog Fantasy, it looks like I'm going to make a decent amount of money this year. But honestly, just to be completely honest with you, I got lucky because I did 20 big dog drafts, which are the $250 drafts, and those I crushed. It looks like I'm going to have 6 out of the 20 leagues getting into the tournament at the end. So they're either in first or second place. But to be honest, in my puppy drafts, I did not do well. And it's just very funny that in my puppy drafts, that's the one I did poorly in. And of course, it's not like me saying, oh, I'm good or anything. It's just I got lucky. If it was the opposite case, I would have lost a ton of money this year. But in my puppy drafts, I'm not going to do that well. But 50 puppy drafts equal 1 big dog draft. And I probably did about 50, 60 puppy drafts. Actually, we probably did a little bit more than that. But nonetheless, those big dog drafts are where the real money is, and we crushed it there. So we're going to have a really good year on Underdog Fantasy, but I honestly think we kind of got lucky, to be honest. Corey Davis going at the 11:08. Okay, so we are on the clock yet again. Okay, so like we said, we went through and we hammered in those wide receivers previously because these guys, I can't guarantee that they're even going to have a role. Can say the same thing about the running back position here. Don't know if these guys are going to have a role. You know what? We know Ryan Tannehill is going to be a starting quarterback, and we know we need 2 starting quarterbacks in this league because we're not going to have access to the waiver wire, and these guaranteed starting quarterbacks are drying up right now. I think if we pass on one now, we may not necessarily have one coming back to us, and I don't see a tier drop off at either running back or wide receiver. So we're going to take Tannehill to pair with Lamar Jackson here. And Alex coming out says, I could also start Chuba Hubbard over DeAndre Hopkins, but probably not. Yeah, no, you can't start Chuba Hubbard over DeAndre Hopkins. I think that would be a very bad call. Okay, now Chasing coming out says, pick 2, Elijah Moore, Jamar Chase, DeAndre Hopkins, and Deebo Samuel. I think that you have to go through and you have to play DeAndre Hopkins. I'm playing Hopkins everywhere. I think this is going to be a shootout between the Cardinals and the Rams. And at the same time with DeAndre Hopkins, I think that you clearly saw he's fully healthy this past week by him playing almost every single snap, as well as Kyla Murray. So I'm going to be going through and playing DeAndre Hopkins easily. And then in regards of Jamar Chase versus Deebo Samuel, it's pretty hard. I'm not going to consider Elijah Moore in this range, even with the Corey Davis injury. Let me see if we had any reports coming out about Deebo Samuel today. I mean, as of about noon, we did not. Okay, so Mac Jones at the 12:02. Let's go through and let's figure out who we're going to go with here. Nahim Heinz signed an extension coming into the year, did he not? Okay, so y'all know with Nahim Heinz, he's a player that in a regular league, we always talk about not really wanting at all. Because with Nahim Heinz, you never know when he's going to have his random pop-off games where he does get about 8 receptions and he does get 20-something fantasy points. So, I mean, even if you had an injury to Jonathan Taylor, it's not like you can go through and say, okay, well, Nahim Heinz, we know all of a sudden that he is going to be a running back that is seeing 20 touches in a single game. That's never going to be the case. But in a best ball format where you don't have to submit your starting lineup, those players actually have a decent role and, I mean, some value here. So as our running back 3, whenever we kind of need a high floor player outside of Christian McCaffrey and Nick Chubb, let's go through and let's take Nahim Heinz here. Honestly, I'm not going to lie. We crushed this draft. We just freaking crushed this draft. Okay, so now our next question. Peyton says, only problem with Brady is he plays Buffalo, so that defense is tough. Yes, that defense is tough, but at the same time, like, if you really want to go through, like, let me go through and let's look at this real quick. Let's look at this together. Let me make sure I can pull this up without affecting the rest of the live stream. Like, I'm telling you, you have to go Tom Brady. Like, if you look at implied team totals from Las Vegas, they're screaming to you that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to put up a ton of points. At the same time, go to Underdog Fantasy, where we're drafting right now. If you look at the player props they have Tom Brady for 300 passing yards. Like, if you think it's that tough a defense, go take the under on Tom Brady. Go take the under on Chris Godwin if you think that you're worried about that. I'm personally not. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game regardless. So, no, I'm going to be going through and I'm going to be starting Tom Brady everywhere we can. Will says Elijah Moore or Jalen Guyton. I'm not starting Jalen Guyton in a single league. I really think you should be avoiding Jalen Guyton everywhere. This is a tight end that is just a primary field stretching option. He's never going to see a considerable amount of targets in Los Angeles. I would go through and instead I would play Elijah Moore. Jason says, do you still like DeAndre Hopkins against Jalen Ramsey? As I've said 10 times this live stream, yes. Now, Alex says, if Pollard doesn't play this week, would you still play Hopkins and Montgomery over Ezekiel Elliott? If Pollard does not play, no, I would get Ezekiel Elliott in the starting lineup. I'm operating under the assumption that you have Tony Pollard good to go. Let me pull up the last report that we had with Tony Pollard here. What's funny is Pollard went in as a running back in the 7th round in this draft. Okay, so Tony Pollard did not practice with a foot injury. The reports coming in claim that Pollard is not dealing with a long-term issue, but is certainly something to keep an eye on as practice progresses this week. So yes, if you have Ezekiel Elliott as the only healthy running back in that backfield, more like the only active running back in that backfield, you would have to go through and you would have to start Ezekiel Elliott. Okay. So you have Emmanuel Sanders, Terrace Marshall. Emmanuel Sanders will be a fun fact here. I don't know if y'all know this, but I mean, I spend my entire life just thinking fantasy football. So, I mean, I kind of know some weird facts like this, but Emmanuel Sanders is going to be a wide receiver that is 82 years old next season. Like, I was looking at his niece's Snapchat story and she put up like that they were going to throw a surprise party for his 82nd birthday in June. So definitely be on the lookout for that. I think drafting him here in the 13th round is probably a little bit rich, but that's just some deep level analysis from yours truly. Of course, if you want more deep level analysis like that, of course, you can find it on Patreon. Okay, so now let's go through Trevor Lawrence at the 1304. God, how the mighty have fallen. I'm not saying that he shouldn't have fallen that far either. I'm definitely not saying that. Okay, so now let's go through and let's find our next pick here. I think that Let me look at, I know that J.D. McKissic, I think, is on the last year of his contract. The big thing is you have to be looking at how long is, I'm going to need to shut my mouth. Okay, so Tua goes at the 1306. I actually know who we're going to be taking with our next pick. Okay, so Josh Palmer, if y'all don't know, he was actually selected in the 3rd round out of Tennessee to the Los Angeles Chargers this year. Didn't really have an intriguing prospect profile, however. Okay, so let's go through, see if there's anything that stands out. I do not really see anything. Let's check the running back position before I add someone in here. At running back, with how gross it's going to be, I was either going to take Kenyon Drake. Wasn't sure exactly how long that injury was going to last, though. But if you see, like, a lot of these guys, you don't even know if they're going to have jobs this next year. And you have to have enough just bodies at the running back position. With J.D. McKissic, I believe he's on the last year of his contract. I probably should have gone through and double-checked that. But yeah, we're going to take Devin Singletary. Is on that rookie deal. Was drafted in 2019 in the 3rd round out of, a very tiny school in Florida. So we're going to take Devin Singletary at the 1309, knowing that he'll be on the Buffalo Bills and in a committee next year. Burke says, are you doing a second draft after this? Would love to join. Let me know in the live chat right now how many of y'all would want to join. Like I said, we're definitely going to be doing these a ton more later this season. We'll probably do one tomorrow night, to be completely honest. I'll say we'll definitely do one tomorrow night if y'all enjoy watching this. So yeah, you can definitely get into one of these. I don't know if we're going to do another one right after this, however, but we'll get a ton more going. Don't worry about that. Okay, so now our next question going to be coming out from... Marcos, who says Zeke or James Robinson, 2 running backs that you don't know what the workload is going to look like. With Ezekiel Elliott and James Robinson, both dealing with the multitude of injuries, I would say now that, this Tony Pollard injury is on the radar, we are obviously going with Zeke beforehand, just because if they both have, questionable workloads, you probably prefer the running back on the offense that is just going to score double the amount of points as the other. So we're going to be going with Zeke, part of Dallas, but especially in the context of if you don't have Tony Pollard in this game, or Tony Pollard possibly as a little bit questionable. Okay, so now let's go through and let's try to figure out who we're going to be going with. Now I'll say this is getting disgusting. Amara St. Brown goes, I like that pick, JN. JN goes with Amara St. Brown, a wide receiver that was selected in round 4 this past year's draft class out of USC. He actually had a very impressive week this past week. We did have him on the waiver wire video. Now, the issue is, as we've discussed, that at this point in best ball season, when you don't have access to the waiver wire, you simply just have to try to find players that you think are going to have roles. Now, Ronald Jones is going to be a free agent this offseason. Ronald Jones has been very, very bad at the game of football. But with Ronald Jones at the same time, he's extremely young. Yes, he was drafted in 2018 as that same class as Nick Chubb, but he was literally 20 years old when that season started, very similar to Kyle Pitts this past year. So Ronald Jones is still extremely young. Now I'll say, once we get closer to the season, I would definitely be taking someone like Will Fuller over Ronald Jones. The issue is, I think just predicting the running backs that are going to have roles at the end of the draft are going to be a lot harder than predicting the wide receivers that should have roles. We'll be able to go through and try to find more guys like Josh Palmer at the end that honestly I kind of feel comfortable about finding, whereas the running back position is just going to be a complete crapshoot. So I would try to get my shots in right now if I can. And now Ryan says, I've been wanting to do Dynasty. And I love hearing what goes on in your selection process. Dynasty Fantasy Football, I'll say, this is not a Dynasty league. This is just a regular 2022 Fantasy Football league. Now, Dynasty Fantasy Football, however, is by far and away the best, and I repeat, the best way to play fantasy football. Like, if you are not into a Dynasty league, you have to be. I know we're going to have a lot of Dynasty analysts popping up on YouTube this offseason because Dynasty is growing so much. I'll say you've got to be careful. A lot of those guys, you can kind of listen to one video and tell that they've never played Dynasty in their entire life. I mean, I actually started this main channel as a dynasty fantasy football channel. I mean, a very long time ago, and it kind of transitioned into a redraft league. So we have a separate dynasty fantasy football channel. But that's why, I mean, I kind of like, if you ask me, oh, who's Mecole Hardman? Mecole Hardman was a wide receiver drafted in 2019 out of the University of Georgia, who really didn't have any production at Georgia. However, he did put up elite testing measurables. That was the offseason that Tyreek Hill was dealing with his off-the-field concerns. He didn't know if Kansas City was going to be able to play Tyreek Hill. So they actually trade up near the end of the second round, with everybody presumably thinking they're taking DK Metcalf, and instead they trade up, get Mecole Hardman, who was a 5-star prospect going into Georgia, but he was recruited as a defensive back. So he actually didn't have that production at Georgia. It was a run-first program, and at the same time, he had that raw athletic profile because he was a defensive back being recruited in. I mean, we just know so many random stats like Amara St. Brown. This is a very unathletic slot wide receiver coming out of USC in the 2021 draft class. I mean, a lot of people thought he was going to go in round 2, round 3, ends up falling to round 4 instead, going over to the Detroit Lions. A lot of people thought he would have that immediate role. However, I mean, you really are betting on a low upside case with a slow, unathletic slot wide receiver in a bad offense. Josh Palmer, I mean, this was someone who stayed all 4 years at Tennessee. Doesn't necessarily, I mean, have anything that you like to see. He's not an elite level athlete. With Josh Palmer here, he didn't have an elite production profile. I mean, he was just a pick that came out of left field whenever he went in the 3rd round to the Los Angeles Chargers this past draft class. Like, if y'all want to know like how everything like that is just burnt into my brain, like, I mean, looking at Sterling Shepard back in 2015, drafted out of the University of Oklahoma in the 2nd round to the New York Giants. He actually was going in the middle of the 1st round in dynasty rookie drafts in that 2015 offseason. Like, you can kind of see that you get so much fantasy football knowledge by being a diehard fantasy football player. That's how I want to say I am better than 99% of people that make fantasy football content on YouTube, especially dynasty fantasy football, because when you're playing dynasty for so damn long, you know more about these players than pretty much anybody else. And Jacob coming out with our next question. Thank you so much, my friend. Says, my roster going into the playoffs, week 15, 10-team full PPR. We got 4 spots: Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Alexander Mattison, Saquon Barkley, Dalvin Cook, Javonte Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Tony Pollard, Christian McCaffrey, RIP, DJ Moore, Stefan Diggs, Keenan Allen, Chase Claypool. Streaming defenses, Nick Folk, what are your thoughts? Okay, so quarterback, you're just going to be playing matchups, most likely going to be playing Rodgers over Russell Wilson every single week. Running back, we're kind of really hoping that we get Dalvin Cook back in sometime soon. Obviously, it sucks that Melvin Gordon's coming back to take that workload away from Javonte Williams here. Like, I would be a lot more excited about this running back position if we had Melvin Gordon out with this injury that was going to last a little bit longer. Wide receiver, I think we're actually perfectly fine at wide receiver for the fantasy football playoffs in week 15 when we get Keenan Allen off the COVID list, because then we'll have 2 wide receiver ones with Stefan Diggs and Keenan Allen. And presumably we'll be able to go through and play like Saquon Barkley at the flex spot, so we won't necessarily need another wide receiver for the flex. So I think that we're honestly completely fine with that roster. The issue is, like, the one thing I would say is once we're going to the playoffs, if we're streaming defenses especially, I would go through and I would check out those matchups and I'd pick up a couple different defenses. That way you can go through and you can play the matchups and just make sure that you have that planned out, because the depth at this point of the season, like someone like Chase Claypool, isn't going to matter as much. Okay, now Donovan Peoples-Jones going off at the 1506. Now let's pick this back up. Good thing we got our quarterbacks, because a lot of these guys don't even know if they will have starting jobs. Okay, so running back, as we've said, I mean, at this point, you're really just looking for players that you know would have a starting job or a shot at one this next offseason. I don't see a single player that fits that mold. So we're going to be passing there. We got Nico Collins going off. AJ Green will be 34 years old. KJ Osborne, we don't know if he'll ever roll. Jalen Reagor, one of the most inefficient wide receivers this offseason. KJ Hamler going to be coming back from that torn ACL. Dimey Brown showed us nothing when he had the ability to get on the field earlier this season. Paris Campbell can't stay healthy. God dang, this is disgusting. Do we go Amari Rodgers? We don't go Amari Rodgers. We go Jalen Reagor. Oh my gosh, but that was a panic pick. Who did we have at tight end? Yeah, I should have taken a tight end. That was a panic pick. We were going through and trying to flex too much on the live stream of knowing every single player in depth, but nonetheless, that was a panic pick, whatever. If you want to hear Jalen Reagor, I mean, coming out of TCU in 2020, a lot of people thought, oh, well, his quarterback play was so bad at TCU, he's going to be a dominant wide receiver when he gets to the NFL. Anybody with that analysis clearly is kind of just crying sadly every single night as they go to sleep. I mean, with Jalen Reagor, we hated him coming in based on the fact that he showed nothing to be special at all, in my opinion, outside of an elite breakout age. But nonetheless, I mean, we'll take him here. Hopefully he gets snaps. And the recovery coming out says, Flock, my man, went from 3-6 to 7-6 with your help, brother. So I have Chubb for the flex. Who should I start, Kareem Hunt or stick with Odell Beckham Jr.? Thank you so much for supporting the channel, my friend. Honestly, having Nick Chubb isn't going to be impacting my decision on if we should start Kareem Hunt or Odell Beckham Jr. I think it is entirely up to you. Last week, I would have been telling you to go with anybody else other than Odell Beckham Jr. But this week, I think Odell's a little bit more appealing just because if you're looking at Odell Beckham Jr., you know this should be a shootout with the Los Angeles Rams as well as the Arizona Cardinals. F it. Let's go Odell. I think it's so damn close. Let's go Odell if it's a full PPR format because this should be a shootout game. It's going to be very high scoring. Okay, I believe Gerald Everett signed a 2-year contract this offseason. Did he not? I believe Gerald Everett signed that 2-year contract. Let me just go through and double. No, he signed a 1-year deal. F me. Tyler Conklin. You'll have Irv Smith Jr. back. I think Irv Smith Jr. was already drafted. David Njoku is going to be oh my God, who are we going with here? Are we taking KJ? Not AJ Green. Okay, did we get him? That was another panic pick there. I probably should have gone KJ Hamler over him. We need to stop reading the. You know what? It's a $5 draft at this point of the draft. It doesn't really matter as much. This isn't necessarily so we can go through and win this $60 pod. This is more so we can just have some fun here. It is what it is. Those past 2 picks were obviously gross, however. Now let's go over to our next question, and this one's going to be coming out from Sebastian says, yo, should I start Taylor Heinecke or Big Ben? I'm going to be going with Taylor Heinecke over Big Ben. Taylor Heinecke has showed us some rushing upside so far this season. And in the case of Ben Roethlisberger, what's really the ceiling play there? You got Darrell Williams at the 1606, Trey Sermon at the 1607. I like the Trey Sermon selection. I really do. And Joey coming out says, in a league where you start 3 wide receivers in double flex for the playoffs, who would you start? Chase, Higgins, Waddle, Hopkins, Barkley, Gibson. Does Burrow change your answer with the stack? Yeah, I'm going to be starting Chase and Higgins regardless, so I don't really get how that would change our answer. I think you go Chase, Higgins, Hopkins, Waddle in the flex. And then if you have J.D. McKissick back in, Saquon Barkley. If no J.D. McKissick, go Antonio Gibson. JN decides to go with his guy, Devin Duvernay, at the 15-11, even though he probably could have got Devin Duvernay at the 20.02. Okay, nonetheless, Deshaun Jackson at the 16-10. I mean, y'all know we went through and we talked about the just deep dive with the fact that Emmanuel Sanders was going to be 82 this offseason. Well, Deshaun Jackson is actually not going to be 82. However, his family has decided to put him in a senior citizen retirement home this offseason. So Deshaun Jackson, I mean, it's nice that he's able to live unassisted for 2021, but he's going to be just too old where he is going to have to go into that home next year. So really wishing the best for Deshaun Jackson. I don't see the reason to draft him for a 2022 fantasy league as he can't score fantasy points from the retirement home. But I mean, you do you. Maybe you're getting points for bowls of Jell-O eaten or something of the sort, but it is what it is. And now Sebastian coming out says, thanks, start 2 of the week. Renfro, Amari Cooper, or Elijah Moore. I would go through and I'd play Hunter Renfro and Amari Cooper. The only saw coming out says Darren Waller or Rob Gronkowski this week. Let's go through and let's just play. Actually, you know what? We're going to be playing Gronk. And at the same time, we're going to be done showing this draft. I'll go through and I'll show the draft at the very beginning because I think that's what people kind of want to see here. Once we're getting to round 17, 18, 19, 20, most of these players aren't even going to be drafted in 2022 to begin with. So yeah, we'll show the top of this draft, and then I'm going to be going through and of course finishing this draft out on my own as we answer your questions in the live stream. That way I can still have a shot at the league prize, but I think to cover those picks at the very end, we don't necessarily need to do that. So let's switch that back over here. I will keep this here so we can be going through and making those selections. JN says, Duvernay is guaranteed a roster spot on the Ravens. Big brain move, really. Interesting. I'd say with Devin Duvernay, maybe. I mean, yes. I guess, you know what? You're right. He's running more routes than what you have with Rashad Bateman this past week. If he's running that many routes, I'd imagine that he is guaranteed that roster spot. Jan says, Mason sensed my upcoming Donta Foreman pick. Did someone take Donta Foreman? I don't even know who you can be drafting at this point. Actually, I know who I'm drafting. Let's load him up. And you know what? We actually have had 4 video uploads / live streams today. So I think maybe we call it a night here a little bit early. Now, yes, this is early. It's only been an hour, but nonetheless, of course, thank you so much for everybody coming out to the stream and supporting the channel. I genuinely appreciate all of y'all here. And a reminder, if y'all want to get into our next draft, which we are going to be doing very often, make sure you go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. And when you sign up, make sure you use promo code FLOCK. When you use promo code FLOCK, they'll match that first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100, and nothing supports this channel more. We actually have one last question coming out from the recovery. It says, what do you think of KJ Osborne from the Vikings? Should I pick him up? Also, my lineup is Rodgers, Cooper, Debo, Andrews, Chubb, Kamara. Great lineup now that we're getting Kamara coming back. And yes, KJ Osborne is going to be worth the roster spot there. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you should go through and play him immediately, but he did flash some upside at the beginning of the season. Obviously, Adam Thielen leaving opens up a lot of targets available in Minnesota, so he's definitely worth the roster spot. And of course, thank you all so much for supporting the channel and being a part of the flock. I hope that we get to see y'all out in the live stream tomorrow night. Wishing y'all the best of luck. Thank y'all, and I hope you have a great day.